Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
Hong Kong is a dystopia.
Hong Kong is the most expensive property market in the world.
Transport systems, telecommunications are all in the hands of a wealthy elite who also dominate the property sector.
What you are looking at is not a prison cell, but somebody's home. In an area of just 2 square meters, about the same size as a phone booth, is one of Hong Kong's infamous coffin homes. With one shared bathroom between 20 people, these are not outliers. Across the small city, more than 200,000 people live in conditions like this.
What the fuck?
This is the harsh reality of a city that has simply run out of space, leaving thousands with no choice but to live in cages. In Hong Kong, the average home costs 18 times the average family income.
So, okay, first of all, wow. But let me see the other cities though. Sydney, Vancouver. Wow, Vancouver. Auckland, San Jose, Melbourne, Honolulu, LA, San Francisco, Bournemouth, and Dorset. So,
I never heard of Bournemouth and Dorset.
I don't know where this is either. But a lot of Oceania or like West Coast, huh? Wow.
This is the
Auckland
worst housing
sounds
Auckland is New Zealand.
New
crisis
Zealand.
in the world. But while all this has been happening, another story has also emerged. Last year, the wealthiest 10% of households in Hong Kong earned 82 times more than the poorest 10%. This figure has more than doubled in just 5 years.
For reference, I would need to see compared to the States, because I honestly I don't know the number for the States. I don't know how big that
At
is.
the center of this are 4 families who dominate Hong Kong's real estate through their Big 4 conglomerates. With a combined net worth exceeding $100 billion, they control over half of Hong Kong's private housing, vast
Wow.
land reserves, and assets larger than the city's annual GDP. While millions are crammed into tight conditions, the city's 6 richest property tycoons are manipulating land supply and driving prices even higher. But as we researched this topic more, we found that this was just the tip of the iceberg. Hong Kong appears to be a wealthy city, but behind the glittering skyrises is another story of a dystopian country, run by a few secret.
But I feel like that's like every big city like that here in the States too. Like it's like you see these TikTok, Instagram videos that this is what it looks like on Instagram, and this is what it really looks like when you turn the camera. Like I think you can make that in every city.
Secretive individuals. This is the sad reality of Hong Kong. This is Kai, a 60-year-old cleaner in Hong Kong's Mong Kok district. For $300 a month, he gets to rent this bedbug-infected section, measuring just 20 square feet. For him, even this is preferable to eviction, with nowhere else to go, and no resettlement arrangements. For single applicants like him, the wait for public housing can stretch longer than 10 years. This situation didn't happen overnight. Hong Kong has a long history of poor living conditions, but to understand how one of Asia's richest cities forces so many to live in cages, we need to look back, because decisions made decades ago have built this dystopian landscape. Modern-day Hong Kong was born out of war. Britain didn't inherit it, they took it. And with that seizure came a new rule. As the British were essentially starting from scratch with disregard to who had owned what before, all land would instead be owned by the government and then leased to individuals and businesses. A decision made in 1841, which still controls the price of rent in 2025. After World War II, Hong Kong's strategic location and business-friendly policies sparked a rapid transformation. China had just experienced a revolution, and Hong Kong became a popular destination for migrants fleeing political turmoil in the mainland, bringing in the entrepreneurial drive and cheap labour, something the locals were quick to take advantage of. By the 1950s,
I wonder why China isn't trying to take over Hong Kong. Like, we see China want to take over Taiwan, but like why not Hong Kong?
in 60s, Hong Kong had become a manufacturing powerhouse, producing everything from textiles to electronics for exports. Hong Kong's economy exploded. Its GDP multiplied 20-fold in less than 2 decades, transforming a coastal outpost into a capitalist powerhouse. It became a global trade hub, joining Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore as one of Asia's 4 tigers, the fastest growing economies in the region. But the faster a city grows, the more fragile its foundations become. By the 1980s, manufacturing had begun its inevitable decline. Companies were starting to move operations to mainland China, where labor was cheap and costs were lower. If they wanted to stay one step ahead, Hong Kong had to chase something different. They pivoted to finance. Having already established themselves as an economic powerhouse, it wasn't too hard to persuade multinational corporations to set up headquarters on the island. And by the 1990s, more than 10,000 firms were moving into Hong Kong every single year. It became one of the world's leading financial centers. But as the clock ticked toward the end of the British rule, the future was starting to look uncertain. As the 1997 handover loomed, many feared what would happen once China took control. The communist regime was renowned for ruling with an iron fist, with media takeovers and asset seizures commonplace. Capital flight was inevitable. Investors and wealthy residents pulled hefty amounts of money out of the country, and within months, the Hang Seng Index plunged by over 20%. Then, just as the transition was underway, another disaster struck. Asia hit a debt crisis. But beneath the surface, a deeper problem was brewing. With just over 1,000 square kilometers of land, Hong Kong was struggling to keep up with a growing wave of people chasing opportunity. By 1999, population density in the city had soared past 6,000 people per square kilometer, 150 times the global average, surpassing even London and New York. Since its boom period, the population had nearly tripled, but the land had stayed the same. Housing had become scarce and increasingly unaffordable. This was the era that gave rise to Hong Kong's cage homes, tiny wire mesh compartments crammed into overcrowded flats. First seen as a temporary fix in the 1950s for the migrant boom, they became a lasting symbol of the city's housing crisis. As property values climbed to some of the highest in the world, the dream of home ownership drifted further out of reach for the average worker. But that was just the beginning of the real nightmare. What would happen next turned a system which was unequal into one which was completely rigged. This video is brought to you by Manscaped, the brand, the lawn proof of cool. It's depicted as its outdated invisible hand at manscaped.com. When
Yeah, I don't know much about Hong Kong either. This is an interesting video.
China took over Hong Kong, it inherited a city with potential, but also laden with imperfections. Many thought that Hong Kong, and especially its outdated housing policies, would soon be a thing of the past. But the system Britain built to enrich the empire wasn't torn down by China. Instead, it was adopted and perfected. As the city reeled from the financial crash, Hong Kong's newly appointed government needed solutions fast. They had an economy to stabilise, businesses to keep afloat, and a population to reassure. So instead of reforming the system, they doubled down, slashing the top rate of income tax from 25% to just 16%. The logic was simple. Lower taxes would encourage consumer spending, drive demand, and keep the economic engine running. But there was a problem, a massive one. Hong Kong still had to pay for all the things that kept the country running. Buses, trains, and even schools all needed government money to survive, and with less tax revenue coming in and the same money being spent, they were on the brink of a financial crisis. So, in a moment of desperation, the government turned once again to the colonial land system and started taking advantage of it by selling government-owned land to generate revenue. They didn't hold back and sold heaps and heaps of land, bringing in around $20 billion every single year. For the government, this was the perfect fix. Land sales alone covered more than 10% of the government's entire budget, enough to fully fund the city's entire public healthcare system. The formula was simple. Keep selling land, keep the money flowing, and keep the system running. But this gold rush wasn't for everyone. The average Hong Kong worker
I mean, you're bound to run out of land eventually.
Yeah.
Like, it's a temporary fix, I get it, but I mean, the land is limited. As they said, it's an island. Like, well, how much land is there to sell?
could barely afford rent, let alone buy land. So who was really snatching up all these million-dollar plots? When leadership changes, opportunities present themselves. The collapse of the Soviet Union gave rise to the oligarchs, and Hong Kong was no different. A small, ultra-wealthy elite saw the opportunity of a lifetime and seized it. As the government sold off their land at an unprecedented rate, a handful of powerful families quietly tightened their grip on Hong Kong's real estate market. Over time, 4 names stood above the rest: the Kwok, the Lee, and the Cheng families. But their influence extends far beyond real estate. With near infinite wealth, they formed strong business ties with both the Hong Kong government and mainland Chinese authorities. In theory, Hong Kong runs on a free market capitalist system, but in practice, housing is no market at all. It's a monopoly controlled by a few people. Their dominance wasn't just about property, it was about influence, control, and the ability to bend an entire city to their will. But just how powerful really are these tycoons? To understand the full scope of their dominance, let's take a closer look at their empire. The 4 families control these 4 property companies. They're more than just names. To the people of Hong Kong, they are the forces that shape the very skyline of the city and dictate the cost of calling their place home. Together, these 4 families have amassed a combined net worth exceeding $100 billion, more than the entire GDP of some nations. But their wealth isn't just measured in dollars. They own leverage over the market, the media, and the government. With that kind of power, the question is not if they will abuse it for profit, it's how they are going to do it. For years, these developers have mastered the art of market manipulation, strategically limiting the release of new apartments to keep supply tight, driving up the prices higher and higher. This artificial scarcity translates into staggering profit margins, among the highest in the world.
Crazy,
While
'cause
property
we saw that in China too as well. They're all like buying property.
Mm-hmm. It's the property is the hot asset everywhere, like here too, because the land is limited, you know. And the only thing is population is not growing at a rate, I guess, predicted back in the day. So eventually there should be less need for housing because if the population is not growing at the rate, so that's gonna be interested how that's gonna affect the markets.
Developers in countries like the US and the UK live off margins around 15%. These firms routinely enjoy margins of 30 to 50%, raking in billions annually. Their ability to control supply not only artificially inflates the values, but also ensures that housing remains an increasingly unattainable luxury for many. To push their profits even further, they have been shrinking the size of apartments to extreme levels. With no real competition, nano flats, some as small as 120 square feet, barely enough room for a sink and a bed, are becoming an increasingly common trend amongst newly developed estates. For many lower middle class Hong Kong residents, these boxes were now their only options, with an estimate of over 220,000 people now living in these flats. Though instant government action seems incredibly necessary, the sheer political influence of these firms completely stops any significant changes from being made. Land policies remain in their favour, while public housing and affordability measures are deprioritised. The numbers tell a shocking story. Last year, the wealthiest 10% of Hong Kong households earned 82 times more than the poorest 10%. 5 years ago, that number was merely half as large. For over a decade, Hong Kong has consistently ranked among the top 10 most unequal places on Earth, according to the Gini.
Mexico, Turkey, Portugal, USA, Poland, Italy, UK, New Zealand, Ireland, Greece. Oh, wow. Portugal and Turkey. Those are interesting ones. I wonder what's up with Portugal. I guess
Where's Spain?
Spain is not on this list. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's after Japan, Greece, Japan, Spain. Right, Spain right before Canada.
I was gonna be shocked.
Yeah, Spain right up before Canada.
Index. It has now surpassed every other country in Asia, a region already known for wealth divides. In a city of 8 million people, just 80 control 11% of Hong Kong's entire wealth. That's a higher concentration of wealth than Russia or South Africa, some of the most unequal nations in modern history. The rich grow richer simply by holding assets, while the working class fights just to keep a roof above their heads. And as property values soar, the gap between those who own land and those who rent it becomes insufferable. Economists have coined a new term for Hong Kong's paradoxical system, Pluto communism. Despite growing public outcry, the government has remained silent, its actions minimal, and its solutions ineffective. In 2024, Chief Executive John Lee announced so-called reforms for subdivided housing. It made headlines, but coffin homes were explicitly excluded, leaving the city's worst living conditions still completely legal and thriving. Rent control was also dismissed, with officials claiming it would interfere with the market. There were no relocation plans, no safety nets, just a silent understanding. If you couldn't keep up, you were pushed into a cage. But this crisis isn't inevitable. In fact, other cities have faced similar challenges and found solutions. Take Singapore, a city with a population density the same as
Kind of puts in perspective, you know, that no matter as how bad you don't have it as bad as some other people, because that, like in Miami, it's bad, right? But I don't think it reached this bad yet. We're heading there, but not this bad.
Hong Kong, yet virtually free from its housing nightmare. Why? Because decades ago, Singapore's government decided to take matters into their own hands. It established the Housing and Development Board, which today builds and manages over 80% of all homes, offering affordable, high-quality housing for all income levels. With abundant public housing, private developers had no room to exploit renters. On the other hand, South Korea allows the free market to still operate, but puts checks on greed. Instead of allowing billionaires to hoard properties, South Korea introduced a massive property gains tax, reaching up to 50% of profits on multi-property owners. In Hong Kong, experts have done the same, calling for reform to broaden the tax base, increase the land supply, and enforce transparency. But every suggestion was ignored, because meaningful change would mean confronting the billionaires who profit from the crisis. Instead, the burden fell on the people, crushed by rising rents, shrinking spaces, and a government that chose wealth over welfare. The crisis is now severe. In 2023, there were more than 1,000 suicide deaths across Hong Kong, with 3 people a day taking their own lives because they simply couldn't bear the suffering. For much of its history, Hong Kong has been seen as a place where hard work led to success. Immigrants, entrepreneurs...
Seems like based on what I gather on this video, Hong Kong is kind of like the America of Asia in the sense that you know how there was American dream. So there's like in Asia there must have been like a Hong Kong dream. You go to Hong Kong to kind of chase that dream to make money because you know that's basically why everybody flocks to America is for the American dream. That's what I'm gathering from this.
Entrepreneurs and workers believe that if they put in the effort, they could carve out a better life for themselves. But that promise is now dead.
Right, because that's exactly the idea about American dream. Like if you can put the effort, you can better yourself. Versus like it used to be believed that in other countries you kind of gonna stay in the same like wealth bracket that your family was in. An American dream supposedly allows you to break out of that tax bracket if you work hard enough.
The housing crisis has effectively ended social mobility. A university graduate entering the workforce today
Yes,
would need
social mobility is the term, exactly.
to save every penny of their salary for about 20 years just to afford a tiny apartment. Even professionals with stable jobs are stuck, living with parents into their 30s or crammed into shared micro apartments. Over 80% of
I mean, living with parents is one thing, but living with parents into like the tiny ass apartment, that's a whole nother thing.
Hong Kong's youth believe that they'll never own a home.
Like if the parents have like a you know like a solid home or like a big apartment, then okay, that's one thing. But if you know the apartment you and your parents living in like 600 square feet apartment, then that's tough.
And many are choosing to leave altogether. From 2020 to 2022, 140,000 people, mostly young, educated professionals, left the city in search of a future elsewhere. Hong Kong's crisis is not a unique case. It's a cautionary tale for global cities facing similar inequality. From Singapore to London to New York, real estate monopolization and extreme inequality are growing problems worldwide. And if left unchecked,
Now
housing
I can understand like what the saying the tiger mom. Like when you see the tiger mom here in the United States, there's a reason for that because
What is
they
a tiger
know
mom?
it's associated with the Asian culture where the mom is hard on the child to succeed. A's is only acceptable, nothing less than an A. And the reason I can see now understand this perspective because they lived, in their own country. If you are not the top, you're in the bottom, and that's the
Yeah.
worst place to be at. So you have to be
Yeah.
at the top.
Absolutely.
So when they leave their country and they come to US and they have this the mindset to be the best, only A's is acceptable. There's a reason for that.
Yeah, you don't leave your country to be the worst at the other country because you know you could have been the worst in your own country. If you live the country, gotta be the best in the other country.
And they know what history shows. History repeats itself. So you don't want to be left behind and not be the ones at the top.
Absolutely.
Mm.
I think that's it. The rest is just recap.
Can I see the comments? This was really eye-opening. I didn't know that about Hong Kong.
I didn't either. That was very interesting to see.
Inside, I can't imagine living in 120 square footage.
Yeah. The government limits the lease of land to property developers intentional to keep land prices high. In theory, Hong Kong runs on free market capitalism, but in practice, a monopoly controlled by a few people. That's capitalism, bro. I mean, yes, but in Hong Kong, it's like really to the extreme in the sense that there's 4 families running. Like it is the same here in the States as well, but it's not 4 families. Maybe it's like 400 families. But the principle is the same, though it is controlled by the rich. This is one of the best micro documentaries I've seen. Meaningful change would mean confronting the billionaires who profit from the crisis. Instead, the burden fell on the people, crushed by the rising rents, shrinking spaces, and a government that chose wealth over welfare.
I'm even sure those wealthy families are competing against each other
Oh
too.
yeah, of course. I'm sure they have like deals, to, like rules, like not like rules, but like okay, like collusion basically. We all do it together, but within that they are definitely competing with each other.
Wow, guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord. Share as much kindness as possible.